Greetings adventurers, this is Lorne, your guild advisor, and welcome back to this week's Cuts and Changes video as I go over DanMachi IV Episode 3 to explain what content from the light novel has been cut, as well as expand upon several of the scenes in the anime adaptation. Overall, this week's episode did a solid job on capturing the tense mood of the party as they realize how much of a threat the Moss Huge has become. There are a few things the anime cut back on, mainly from the Moss Huge's point of view, as well as an extended underwater battle scene, but I'll do my best to cover them. Anyway, let's start the breakdown for Episode 3. The episode begins with a recap of the fight between the Moss Huge and Belle, and then we are treated to a scene of the Moss Huge hunting down a steel blue crab to eat its magic stone. We see that the monster has been stashing away the adventurers from Lewis's party, so we can use them as bait to set up a trap for Belle's party later in the episode. The light novel actually features a lot of content in the Moss Huge's point of view, such as the monster's past when it was still a weak Moss Huge with one notable difference. It had more intelligence than its peers, and was able to run away from tough encounters with strong adventurers, and even used its fellow brethren as decoys to escape. I think part of the reason the anime skips this in-depth look into the Moss Huge is that it would be hard to adapt its history and thought processes into an anime format because the monster cannot actually speak. Instead, the anime relies on the dialogue between Belle's party and Lewis to explain its strength and use of tactics. I will try to summarize the main points of interest from the light novels when it comes to the Moss Huge. As I've stated before, this Moss Huge is a type of rare spawn because unlike other Moss Huge, it had a bit more intelligence which allowed it to approach situations tactically rather than by pure animalistic instinct. Its desire to survive allowed it to avoid unfavorable situations and use hit and run tactics to ambush adventurers, the same adventurers which once gave it trouble. The first time it ate a magic stone was after defeating one of its own kind, and the monster was overcome with an intoxicating feeling of pleasure. The eating of magic stones to become stronger is what truly makes a monster an enhanced species. Over time, the Moss Huge started to learn that adventurers who started chance were very dangerous as they were the magic users. This made it prioritize killing them first before moving on to the rest of the group. The Moss Huge was also adamant on not letting any adventurer escape. It also tries to dispose of corpses by throwing them into the water so they cannot be found. That's why the guild has issued a notice for a search party to locate missing adventurers, unaware that the Moss Huge is the reason for them. It is also mentioned that the Moss Huge had once spotted eyes and other Loki familiar members in the past, and that the monster felt a terrible fear when seeing them. It knew it was outmatched and avoided contact with them. The Moss Huge is also aware of the existence of Xenos, and considers them to be traitors to his kind, wanting to one day become strong enough to eliminate them. When we come back to Belle's party after the OP, you can see that Mikoto is positioned somewhat towards the outside of the group. This is because she is currently using her Yatano Black Crow skill to detect any incoming monsters. The party realizes that healing spells won't work on the Ivy and actually cause it to grow because it's sapping away the victim's vitality. Using potions will also have the same effect. When we see Belle react to Lewis's severed arm, he is thinking about the fact that Lewis is likely to be handicapped forever. Seeing this happen to Lewis, someone he actually knows, is quite a shock to him and a reminder of the dangers of the dungeon. Something to note is that Naza actually has an artificial arm, which replaced the one she lost against a monster in the past. However, the arm made by Dion Kecht Familia was extremely costly, and the reason why Miak Familia lives in somewhat poor conditions. The arm also isn't exactly meant for combat use. Speaking of Dion Kecht Familia, Cassandra mentions that the Dia Saint from this Familia may be able to heal the Ivy. For those of you unaware, the adventurer with the Dia Saint title is Amid, who has previously been seen in the Sword Oratoria anime, as well as the DanMachi Season 3 OVA. She is known to be the most powerful healer in Arario, but as the party points out, it's possible that even her ability might not be able to remove the parasitic Ivy. When Belle asks for everyone's help, they are taken aback at how calm he is about the situation, but Belle realizes that he needs to drive away everyone's sense of panic, even if his own confidence was an illusion. He was embracing the role of a leader. Belle realizes that the monster they are facing is likely a variation of a Moss Huge, which is normally found in the middle levels. but it seems this one went down the floors of the dungeon to seek the magic stones of stronger monsters and of course adventurers. Luvis asks Bell to defeat the Moss Huge before it becomes a problem, and to help save his fellow party members who are from Modi Familia. He also reveals that Dormal has a party in the area as well. They are adventurers from Magni Familia. One thing of note cut from the anime is when Luvis compares the Moss Huge to another case of an enhanced species called the Bloodstained Troll. It was a monster that wreaked havoc in the dungeon for almost 10 years. Eventually the guild confirmed its existence, but more than 50 people had died collectively from the monster before it was ultimately defeated by Freya Familia. It was at least level 5 in strength, and Luvis believes the Moss Huge has the potential to be even more dangerous due to its seemingly high intelligence. The story is an interesting tidbit, but not crucial information that needs screen time. Chigusa actually gets some original lines to say to Cassandra in the anime, where she's hopeful that the party will succeed. I think this is a nice touch considering that Chigusa doesn't normally get too many lines, and that she's had scenes that were skipped in Season 3. When the party spots the trap laid out by the Moss Huge, they devise a plan on how to divide the roles of the group. Something the anime changes from the light novel is that Lily is the one directing the group into their roles. Originally, Aisha organized the plan, but I approve of the change as the story is trying to shape Lily into a strategist. When Aisha and Belle charge in to fight the Moss Huge, we later discover to be a decoy, the novel goes into how the monster's trap actually tricked Mikito's Yatsuno Black Crow skill. As I mentioned before, Mikito's skill allows her to detect monsters she's encountered before like a radar, but she can't actually differentiate between the size of the monsters or which ones they are specifically, only that the monsters are in set locations. The decoys a Moss Huge can make count as monsters, which ends up fooling Mikito's skill. The anime does add in a little detail with Mikito looking behind her before the noise of the emerging Moss Huge is made, which can be viewed as Mikito's skill kicking in. This happens very quickly in the anime, but you can actually see Belle charge his foot with Argonaut in order to gain a burst of speed to reach Lily and the others in time. Remember that his skill isn't just restricted to charging his weapons or his firebolt. He also charged his fist in the past when he punched Leto during Season 3. If I were to give a criticism, it's that I think they should have framed how fast Belle was moving a bit better in the anime. He actually looks faster when he's running back at the Moss Huge immediately afterward, because of the speed lines in the frame. Something interesting to point out is that the fight that takes place between Belle and the Moss Huge here is written in the monster's point of view. But again, that's hard to adapt in an anime format because the Moss Huge cannot speak its thoughts. When Belle countered its trap with his quick thinking to use Argonaut, the monster was very irritated. It decided right there and then that it wanted to kill Belle first. When the monster looked at Belle, it saw him as dangerous. The monster perceived his red eyes with the flame of outrage towards the fact that the monster almost severely harmed his fellow adventurers. When the monster sees Belle start to use Firebolt, it remembers its past experiences with magic, and how there is usually a chant time before the magic is released. This is why the monster tries to immediately attack, but then is shocked when Belle's Firebolt fires almost immediately. It had no idea that Belle possessed a rare Swift Strike magic spell that did not require a chant. After the monster is hit by Firebolt, Belle actually starts immediately charging towards it, slashing away at its body in the light novels. Instead, the anime cuts this portion of the fight short and skips to the part where Belle is wrapped by the Moss Huge's wooden whips and is taken into the water. In the novels, there's actually a whole fight that takes place in the water between Belle and the Moss Huge as they are being carried by the current. As Belle has restricted mobility in the water, he's doing everything he can to defend himself, but he suffers blows to the face and the gut, and to make matters worse, an aqua serpent even appears and bites its fangs into his shoulder. Belle's not having the greatest day. While he's trying to deal with the serpent on his shoulder, the Moss Huge lets him go like in the anime. Belle manages to get the aqua serpent off him and kill it, but is puzzled by why he was let go, only to find himself falling down the Great Falls. We're taken back to the party after Daphne stops Lily from acting reckless and trying to go after Belle. To clarify, Mikito is using her Yatsuno White Crow skill to verify that Belle isn't anywhere close to them, as Mikito can detect members of her familia within a certain range. Aisha points out that Bell is actually a lot stronger than most level 4s despite the fact that he just leveled up. This is due to how his Liara's Freze skill allows his stats to grow incredibly fast. Normally adventurers can level up when a stat such as strength reaches D rank, but in Bell's case, most of his stats are already around A or S rank when he levels up. Level ups give a big boost in power overall, but since Bell constantly has higher than normal stats when he levels up himself, the extra stats carry over like an extra hidden container, making him far stronger than other freshly leveled up adventurers of the same level. The dialogue that Luvis shares with his party members as he apologizes is anime original and a nice touch to the show to give him a bit more character. When Lily explains her plan to go to the cliff of floor 25 and make use of Mikoto's gravity magic if need be, Daphne is incredibly impressed, shocked that the prum she was just tutoring seemed to have surpassed her in the ways of strategy. Daphne previously saw Finn of Loki Familia direct a fight against the Goliath on floor 17 and couldn't help but overlay Finn's face with Lily's as she was talking. There was also a small bit of dialogue between Haruhime and Lily that was cut where Haruhime reveals to Lily that Bell told her that the party would be able to rely on Lily. Haruhime wishes she could be just as useful, but Lily counters this, saying that Haruhime's level boost is just a trump card they need for emergencies. Right before the party encounters Dormal's party, the anime skips a scene where Aisha finishes using her magic to kill a wave of monsters. The party is impressed at her strength, but Aisha points out that she can only manage to protect them without Bell because the party is making use of Welf's magic swords. This was likely cut as this is a relatively minor scene that would require a lot of time to animate because of all the magic involved. When Bell is fighting off against Iguazu, he is only using Hakugen because it's an incredibly light weapon and because it takes all his concentration to just hit the bullet speed monsters with this one blade. It was useless to rely on sight to defeat them, he had to predict the trajectory of the monsters. As time passes, Bell is getting more and more accustomed to the speed of the Iguazu. It turns out that Bell was not completely used to his fresh level 4 body. He pretty much went straight into the expedition without testing out his physical abilities, but after this trial by fire against the Iguazu, he was now acclimated to them. Overall, his fight with the Iguazu is a bit more intense in the novels. I think transitioning into a different scene in the middle of it was a mistake, since it cut some of the tension from Bell's struggle. Bell comes to an understanding that sometimes adventurers have to take drastic measures as they can be unavoidable, like his desperate foray against the swarm of Iguazu. Afterwards, he's met by the applause of a mermaid, ending the episode. All in all, this was a solid episode in terms of an adaptation. Despite not being able to show much in the way the Masuji's point of view, the anime is able to communicate partly through the monster's actions and the character dialogue that it is both a very unusual and deadly threat. Some of the action scenes were cut back or outright skipped in the case of the underwater battle between Bell and the Moss Huge, but I think a lot of these cuts were made due to wanting to focus the budget of the overall show on the more climactic scenes which will happen later on in the arc. The anime is still able to convey the danger of the Moss Huge and nail the overall dire tone of the situation, and that's what's most important. In terms of this week's danmemo anime side story, it features a group of adventurers that end up witnessing Bell's fight against the swarm of Iguazu. This is original content not in the light novel, and I'll provide a link in the video description for your viewing pleasure if you don't have access to the mobile game. That's all I have for this week's video, and I will see you all next week for episode 4. Please like the video if you found it informative, and subscribe to the channel for more DanMachi related content. Don't forget to follow me on my socials, and this is Lorne, your guild advisor, signing out.